So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! Over the last couple of weeks, we've talked a lot about what the Detroit Lions should do with their 29th overall selection. We've talked about different prospects that could potentially be the pick at 29. We've talked about potentially trading down all the way out of the first round entirely to recoup some draft assets and to build a stronger class overall. But we have yet to really consider the fact that the Detroit Lions may end up being aggressive this year. After falling just short of a Super Bowl in 2023, the Detroit Lions very well may feel like that one big splash piece could be the difference between a Super Bowl victory and another loss in the NFC Championship game. So today, we're going to take a look at a universe where Brad Holmes is aggressive, where Brad Holmes decides, hey, this is my guy in the draft. This is who I'm going to go get. This is our Detroit Lion, and this is our guy. And he does whatever it takes to go and get his guy. So with that being said, we're going to explore three different trade options today, one being very close to the Detroit Lions' 29th pick, one being right within the middle of the first round, and one being within the top 10. So with that being said, let's start off with the most likely and the simplest option, and that being a trade up into the mid-20s. Not trading up too far in order to give up too much draft assets, but trading up enough to potentially secure yourself one of the better and more premier defending players from this class. Now, one team that I really identified that could potentially be looking to trade down would be the Philadelphia Eagles. They are a very veteran team with a very veteran GM. They have a GM that has shown before he is not afraid to trade down out of the first round of the NFL draft entirely. And I do not think a trade from 22 to 19 would really be the biggest downfall for the Eagles, right? I think that they would be very much willing to trade down just a couple of spots in the NFL draft. And trading up to 22 could give the Detroit Lions a chance at a player like Kool-Aid McKinstry, guaranteeing they get their third cornerback off the board. Potentially a guy like Johnny Newton or Byron Murphy II is a guy that could potentially be gone by the 29th pick, but one of them will likely be available at the 22nd pick. So trading up just 7 spots in the NFL draft, you now have a difference between maybe not getting any of these players to maybe having your selection between 2 or even all 3 of these players. It would give the Lions the opportunity to get their guy in the draft without necessarily having to give up too much in terms of compensation. Now, I put together a little bit of a mock trade. This, of course, is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly what would happen, but I do think it gives a pretty good idea of kind of what the Lions and Eagles may be looking at for a trade. So for the trade package I put together, the Eagles are sending the 22nd pick as well as the 120th pick to the Detroit Lions. But in return, they move down 9 spots in the first draft. They move down 7 spots in the first round, but they move up nearly 50 spots from pick 120 to pick 73. I think it is well worth the trade for the Philadelphia Eagles. They can still get a good cornerback. They can still get a good linebacker, a good defensive end, a good offensive lineman in the draft, while the Detroit Lions potentially move up for either their cornerback of the future or an interior defensive lineman at the 22nd overall pick. Now, Brad Holmes, again, has shown that he is not afraid to trade up within the first round. He has done it a couple of times, and he's actually made multiple trades in the first round over the last couple of seasons as the Detroit Lions general manager. So I don't think this is out of the realm of possibility, but I also don't necessarily think that the Lions will trade up unless they really, really think that a player won't fall to them or they really fall in love with a player in the mid-20 range. Now, moving up a couple of more spots from the Philadelphia Eagles, I have 2 teams that I think could potentially trade down, but I only really talked about one, and that was the Seattle Seahawks with pick number 16. Now, I think a very similar thing could be said about the New Orleans Saints at the number 14th overall spot. Both of them would be within your striking range of a potential Quinyon Mitchell, a Teron Arnold, a Jared Verse, or at the very, very end of Laiatu Latu's range, although that might be a little bit of a long stretch as well if the Lions wanted that guy. right? If the cornerbacks start to fall and they want the number one cornerback off the board, if they want Jared Verse after Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu go off the board, if they want that last top tier edge rusher, the 16th to the 14th overall pick could be the spot in order to get that done. And I think that it makes sense for both the Seahawks and the Saints. The Seahawks are in my opinion, fairly complete team. I do think trading down to the 29th overall pick would not be the end of the world for them. And for the proper compensation, it might even be the proper move in order to do so. They have quite a bit of talent on that roster. I don't think the 16th overall pick is going to give them a single player that will put them over the top into the playoff race or into the playoffs in general. But I do think if they trade down and get maybe 2 or 3 picks within the top 100, that could be more impactful for the long term than that 16th overall pick by itself. And a very similar thing goes for the New Orleans Saints as well. So with that being said, I think a fair trade package would be the Lions sending the 29th, 61st, and 73rd overall picks to the Seattle Seahawks in return for the 16th and the 81st overall picks. Now, this is a little bit based off of the Jameson Williams trade for a couple of years ago, where the Detroit Lions gave up pick 32, 34, as well as pick 66, I believe, for pick number 12 and pick number 42. Now, the Lions don't necessarily have that top tier second and third round picks. They have more middle of the road second and third round picks, but they're not getting the 42nd pick back. They are getting the 81st pick back. This could allow the Detroit Lions to move up for a player again like Jared Verse, for a player like Teron Arnold, for a player like Kenyon Mitchell, and potentially get their top defender while also still having a little bit of draft capital for later throughout the process. And then we have the less likely option. We have the option where Brad Holmes falls in love with a prospect, where he has to have his guy in the draft process. And they decide to trade up into the top 10. And I do think a potential trade scenario would be the Chicago Bears at the 9th overall spot. Now, I know it is an interdivisional trade, and I know that it is probably a little less likely than the other options available, not only because it is a top 10 pick, but because it is a division rival. But I don't see the Jets moving down. I think they're going to try to take one of the better weapons if they fall, or one of the better offensive linemen. I don't see the Falcons trading down. If anything, I see the Falcons trading up. I don't see the Titans trading down. I don't see the Giants trading down. By the time you get into the top 5, it's going to cost multiple first round picks, probably 3, if not 3 plus. And I think as far as the 9th to 10th overall range, you're talking more about a Jameson Williams-esque trade as opposed to a Bryce Young-esque trade. Now, talking about and speaking on that trade for Jameson Williams a couple of years ago, it looks something like this, where the Detroit Lions sent the 32nd, 34th, and 66th overall pick to the division rival Minnesota Vikings in return for the 12th and 46th overall pick. So assuming, right, knowing that they went from 32 to 12, jumping about 20 spots, going from 29 to 9, the same distance, and again, not for that top 5 pick, I think the compensation could be pretty similar, and I don't want to be super biased towards this opinion, so I asked a couple of Bears fans, and they said it was a relatively fair trade, and we're looking at a potential trade of the 29th, 61st, and 73rd picks yet again, with a 2025 fifth-round pick included for the 9th and the 75th overall pick, with again that 2025 fifth round pick swap. Now, I think this would be pretty fair value for the Chicago Bears, who currently only hold 4 picks in this NFL draft. At the 9th overall position, already after drafting their quarterback of the future in Caleb Williams, let's say that both Odunze and Neighbors go off the board before the 9th overall pick. They don't feel confident in any of the weapons left, and they don't want to spend that 9th overall pick on an offensive lineman. Let's say they decide to trade down, and they are shooting for maybe a Jackson Powers Johnson at 29, or maybe even trading back up within the first to get him, but they're dropping down some spots, getting 3 top 100 picks, while the Detroit Lions move up and they go get their Laiatu Latu, and they guarantee that guy. They go guarantee their Dallas Turner. They go guarantee their Quinyon Mitchell or their Teron Arnold, or heck, maybe they even go up and they get Romo Dunze if they can convince the Bears to pass on him. Maybe they go get, their tackle of the future, right? Whoever that may be. I don't necessarily think this is the most realistic trade-up, because I don't think there is a guy for the Detroit Lions that will definitely go within the top 10. I think if they can trade more with that Seattle range from that 14 to 16, that is the most realistic trade spot for them. But if they do want to get aggressive, if they love Dallas Turner as a prospect, if they love and have to have Laiatu Latu as a prospect, this is a real trade scenario that could go through, and a very similar trading scenario to what the Lions gave up to move up for Jameson Williams when he was coming out of Alabama. So with all of that being said, those are my 3 trade-up options. Those are kind of the 3 situations I could see the Detroit Lions going for as far as range, compensation, and what players they very well may be targeting at those spots. There is a short-term option, there is a longer jump option, and of course, there is the top 10 option where they trade with a division rival and potentially get a top player from this class. I'd be very curious what you guys have to say about all of this, what trade option you would want to see, and whether you want to see the Lions trade up or down in the NFL draft. I'd be very curious what you guys have to say, and if you want to see a video about trading down, I'd be very happy to do that as well. But with all of that being said, that is all for guys today. Let me know your trade opinions down in the comments below. I'd be very curious to guys hear your opinions. And if you're a fan of the Seahawks, Saints, Bears, or Eagles, let me know how you'd feel about that trade down scenario as well from the other side. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.